All right, guys, great one coming up today with Dr. Doug Brackmann, author of the book Driven. This is about a genetic gift that shows up in only about 10% of the population. It shows up oftentimes in special forces soldiers, CEOs, entrepreneurs, pro athletes. And I'm going to guess a lot of you guys that are listening to this show just knowing who you are. In fact, I've previewed this information, the material of the book, with a few of you guys, and I've been told it's nothing short of life-changing. Maybe in understanding yourself for the first time, or understanding a child or a parent. This is something that our society doesn't really understand and often mislabels as things like ADD, ADHD, OCD, maybe an extreme hyper-focused type A personality. Doug is going to help us understand why you're wired differently, help you understand things like why you struggle with fulfillment, and really talk about emotions, emotional control, why emotions aren't real. He likes to say calling bullshit on yourself. So this is really important, really helpful information. Before we jump into it, I just want to say there are going to be some graphics here on the screen. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. Turn on your notifications and like this video. Also share it with somebody else who's going to benefit, because again, this is really important, life-changing information that you'll may understand for the first time ever with Dr. Doug Brackmann. Let's get into it right now. All right, my pleasure today to welcome. I'm going to hold up the book here for the YouTube listeners. Author Dr. Douglas Brackmann. Driven is the book. Understanding and harnessing the genetic gifts shared by entrepreneurs, Navy SEALs, pro athletes, and maybe you. Doug, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, actually really looking forward to this.
I am too. And I love the subtitle. Although when I first read it, it's kind of like, well, I'm not a Navy SEAL. I'm not a pro athlete. This might be interesting, but does it have anything to do with me? And then it hooked me. And I want to just share on air by way of thank you to you, and maybe for the audience to really understand the importance of this material and what you can share with us today. As soon as I started reading this book, and man, I was barely into it. It really spoke to me in ways that made me want to understand more about myself. And then as it sat with me, I had a conversation with a colleague, and I said, you got to read this. I think you got to read this. And you've had a chance to speak to him now. He came back and said, thank you. This book was life-changing insight in understanding his son, his 14-year-old son, for the first time, really deeply. And in fact, his father, two people that were very different from him. And so for those who it may speak to directly, or maybe it's a spouse, a partner, a child, a parent, really important information we're gonna cover here today. So thank you for what you're doing.
Greatly appreciate that. And yeah, and I am a psychologist, and despite what any other psychologist would say, psychologists get into the field to figure out their own shit. So it's a purely selfish endeavor at certain points, and it's a book about me and my life. And so it surprised me how many people it resonated so specifically with. We feel so different as Drivens, and yet we are so similar to each other. It's really weird. So I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm glad.
Yeah, of course. As I read it, I'll be honest, as I was reading, I was kind of going, well, maybe that does describe me, or maybe it doesn't. And so I vacillated a little bit, and I want to explore that today. But what you just said, I'm really curious about, is it did feel like you were writing the book for and about yourself initially. What is your backstory to this, the kind of ebb and flow of your life and how this showed up?
I am driven, and that, all things Dr. Doug is at that website. So I'll just start at the beginning. So second grade, third grade, fourth grade, just this profound awareness that I was different. And it was this kind of a insightful moment of, I remember it very vividly in fourth grade, about why the rest of the class doesn't get what a waste of time this is. Like, this has got to be, we're memorizing multiplication tables. Like, really? And 80, 90, 95% of the class is just like, yeah, and I got 100%. And it's just like, where the hell are we going to use this? Like, what is the point? And so that big picture thinking, and, my grades were hit or miss. And if I really liked this subject, I, aced it. If I didn't, I could give two rat's asses and didn't show up. And so that feeling that was in me that I was different, and also this intensity, I've been accused of being intense. God, you're such an intense person, has been with me. And then, that evolved into, by 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, the ridiculousness of school, of just like, what is the point? And I found other things that actually got my interest going. That's my joke about smoking pot. I only smoked pot once in my life, from the age of 14 to 18. It is just this continue from the first day I smoked pot till, the last. It was just game on. But I had the fortunate experience of having my driven traits and driven qualities blow up my life when I was 17. And from the first time I freebased cocaine, which, I won't educate you about how to freebase, but if you use liquid ether and cocaine, it creates a substance that absolutely controlled me, took away my own willpower. And, as I talk about being a psychologist, and who's really in charge of me, and is it, if you've read the book or understand the model, which we can go through it today, about, there's two operating systems, one that lives in your head and another one that's in your body. And when I was in grad school, 91, 92, through the mid 90s and into the late 90s, there was huge arguments about free will. And do we really have free will as a human being? Kinda. That, kinda answer didn't satisfy very many people. And it turned into this massive exploration, really starting in about 2010 is when the functional MRI got good enough that we could really start to see scientifically what's going on inside the human animal. The other thing they did was crack the human genome. And so they mapped the entire genome. And we're 98% overlap with chimpanzees, and so it's like we are a bunch of monkeys, but that 2% difference is really important. And it started this discussion around, is it nature versus nurture? And the ADD thing started to become really big. And when I was a kid back in the 70s, ADD wasn't the forte. I mean, that was a rare. You were just a pain in the ass kid that got bored easy. Now it became this huge social label. Worse is it became an excuse. And that pinged me, made me feel like there's something has to be done. So 2010, I had my license and was practicing psychologist, but really started to get into the genetics and the functional MRI about what the hell's going on. Same time, 2001, thereabouts, really in the late 90s, the Time magazine came out with this article that, we found the genetics behind alcoholism.
Right.
And I was like, wow. And it was the DRD2-1 allele. It was the dopamine receptor number 2. And I read that article and it lit a candle inside of me that, holy crap, maybe I'm this way for a good reason. And at the same time, this guy named Tom Hartman was a parent that had this raging ADD kid, and they were pathologizing the crap out of the kid. He's broken, there's something wrong. And Tom, smart guy that he is, said bullshit. And he wrote a series of books about a hunter in a farmer's world, and followed it up with this other book called The Edison Gene, and really looked at the common sense of people's differences. Darwin was a smart guy, that the herd is not going to be the same. And he said, there must be a good reason for ADD. Yeah. And then I took that to, a whole new level of really understanding the genetics behind it in relation to our identity and the way we are in the world. And that's standing on Tom's shoulders. And very simply, I felt broken my whole life. Felt like there was something missing or wrong all the time. It's called boredom. and I created an identity around that. And, that identity that, I could have called my book The Shame-Based Personality Type. And it led me into a really deep understanding of what shame is and a deep understanding of self-psychology. And that self-psychology, then, you really want to understand the self, get into Zen. And so I really got into Zen. And it is a dismantling of really taking apart what is this self anyway. So that's basically what got me to you. And, and I'll say it, man of mystery, mastery. Mastery is what drivens are designed to live.
Absolutely.
And so it is a massive gift. And obviously, in my own experience, I was living in a car at 17. It sucked really bad. And so I know where my genetics and I know where my underlying behavior can take me. And am I really in control of that? And that is, led me in my doctoral dissertation was about self-sabotage, was about why January sucks at the gym. And it sucks because everybody's monkey mind has temporary control over your body. But come February, and I just did this slide, come February, 78% of people, February 14th, Valentine's Day is when they measured it, don't remember their New Year's resolutions. And so you make these firm commitments and resolutions, and by February, you don't even remember what the hell they were. So what is going on there? And that led me into writing a book about what might be and what is going on there for driven people. So,
yeah, for me, driven is a positive. I see that title, it's a positive thing. I don't know if it is for everybody, but then, yeah, there are these other labels.
My wife.
Right. Exactly.
My wife. Yeah. So it's
crazy, different, right? But you mentioned others that we've used as labels that aren't necessarily societally positive, like ADD, ADHD, OCD.
Yep.
You found a way to channel this at one point. We were talking a little bit off air about the Spartan medals and stuff back here. I find a lot of people in that community, and maybe you did as well in the Ironman triathlete community, folks that are going to throw themselves headlong into something, right? And whether it's pot, whether it's freebasing cocaine, whether it's religion, or
right.
whether it's a sport, are you going to find a healthy addiction or are you going to find an unhealthy addiction?
And that is, they don't like calling us addictive personalities, but, it's basically the addictive type A personality. And the understanding of it is key to really learning how to harness this stuff for me. That in meditation is integral in my story. And, I've been through, as a psychologist for 35 years now, I've been through at least three big waves in the psychology world of mindfulness, and it's going to save the world. About 2, 3, 4 years into it, people figure out it's really hard and they stop. And then, 5 years later, 8 years later, oh my God, mindfulness is going to save the planet again. And I'm seeing that again with all the psilocybin and medicine journeys, and oh my God, it's going to save the world. Yeah, but it's not the work you need to do. And so part of driven and driven, as I joke half-heartedly, is that, if we, as driven people, we're wired to feel a couple of things differently in our reward system. So the dopamine receptor number 2, which I mentioned before, is the boredom gene. And if you think about a herd of people or a herd of gazelles or a herd of whatever, part of the herd is going to feel this sense that whatever's happening right now is not enough. And if you think about a farmer, if they felt that, they would wander away from their crops. They would get away from how boring it is to sit around and watch stuff grow. Hunters, if we didn't feel that sense of angsty kind of, God, I got to get out of this cave and go discover something, we would be stuck and not survive. And so insight into that, boredom is a lie. Boredom is this central nervous system dysregulation that feels like there's something missing or wrong. The more interesting reward center that I look at, dopamine receptor number 2 or 4 is the FOMO gene. And so we have this fear of missing out gene. And again, going back to the farmer hunter model, you think about farmers, they're literally wired to feel like their current location is good enough. And they're sitting there, where the crops are good enough and this is good enough and they can, manage that. Where hunters are wired to feel like the grass is greener over the next hill. There's more game, there's more woolly mammoths over there. And so we're wired to feel this wandering gene, this genetic shiny object syndrome that, oh my God, it will be so great when I'm finally on summer vacation. And using that as a reference point made school intolerable for me. And so those genetics can become really harmful for people because, especially in a marriage, if you would get FOMO with your wife, it's not a good thing. And so building insight to those is essential for drivens. If you don't, those things can blow up your world.
So to drive a little deeper into that insight or awareness in what you're calling the driven personality type or genetic type, the 10% of the population, do they have both that D2 and D4 inclination, or can be one or the other?
It's fantastic time to be a psychologist, because epigenetics, we used to have arguments. Is it nature versus nurture? That argument is gone. You can no longer separate the expression of the human genome from the environment. And so even though you may have the exact same, very similar genetic profile, it will manifest very differently based upon the environment you're put in. Mm-hmm. And so is it your genetics? Do I need to go get tested? The answer is no. It doesn't. You do for other reasons to find out if you got, some biohacks you can make for your genetic profile. But as far as your, drivenness and, propensity for boredom, and FOMO, it is all about the insight into it. You have to learn to call bullshit on your emotion, or even better, what I like to teach is called reality checking your emotion. Reality checking emotion is meditation. And so is what's happening in my central nervous system, in my body right now, an accurate reflection of what's going on around me in the immediate moment? And it's a kind of Japanese koan-ish or Japanese riddle. How would you even answer that? Is it an exact match? Am I feeling what I should be feeling sitting in this room? Which, that's an impossible compared to worms. I mean, what are you talking about? And so the curious exploration of what's happening inside my body. Yeah, but I'm bored and I don't like this feeling. But there's no reason. There's no saber-tooth tiger here. There's nothing here that I need to solve. There, and the world basically, and this is what I write about in the book, building off Tom Hartman. 4,000 years ago, most of the human species adapted to a sedentary, boring world, and adapted to living in great giant societies with very specific roles and very simple identities. They became butchers and bakers and candlestick makers. Where drivens, we have a different brain structure. Is the other thing I'll talk about too for a second. Thankfully, there's a lot of money in ADD and ADHD. And so there's been a ton of research around, what pill works best, which I don't agree with, but it is this ability to actually see normals or non-ADDs from ADDs in functional MRIs in real time. And most consistent finding and across thousands of studies and tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of participants, is that you see in normals this nice bright activity in the frontal lobe. And it is, the frontal lobe is the executive of the brain. So basically the one that's deciding what's most important to pay attention to right now. And if you think of a farmer, they see the world as a series of sequential steps. If you're watching this, it's literally they're seeing, you put your finger in the ground, You put some corn in it, you pat it covered, you water it, you patiently wait, and then it grows, and then you patiently wait, you harvest, you store a bunch of that grain for next year in case bad things happen. And so you're very managing your impulses, and that is this part of the frontal lobe. And the defining feature of ADD, ADHD is something called hypofrontality, or underactive frontal lobe. And it's misleading, kind of. But you put us in a functional MRI and you see this nice ball of energy in the back of our heads, in the occipital lobe, and that's controlling our eyesight. So rather than using our thinking to go through the world, we use our eyeballs. And we, can walk into a room, and as my daughter can say, something's different here. And we are incredibly perceptive people. And we have hypofrontality, and the frontal lobe isn't not active in ADDs. It's just differently active. And so you see little balls of light in both the left and right hemisphere, and kind of more generalized. And I call that multi-thinking. And so drivens, we see the big picture almost reflexively. Like I walk into my 4th grade class and everybody's sitting there doing a spelling test, and it's like, what's the point of this? Like, how does this fit into my big scheme of life and my big picture? And everyone else in the class doesn't see that. They don't even register it. It's like, why do you even ask? What do you care? So, well, this is a waste of time. Problem with that is that, particularly when you start meditating and start working with all my drivens, it's like double clicking on the apps, to find out how many apps you have running in the background of your thinking. And, normals, 3, maybe 4 kind of thoughts pinging around in the head, driven 7 to 9. So literally we are carrying more multiple concepts at the same time. And when I first started writing 10, 15 years ago, I used to call it the entrepreneurial mind, because we see how complex systems work together and can integrate together in a much deeper way. And we try to explain that to non-drivens, and it's, they look at us like we have 2 heads, and what the hell are you talking about? You're tangential and you don't make sense. Where we perceive them as stupid, slow, and lazy. And so it is this mismatch that, they're made that way for a good reason, and it's their world. They created this world. We're the ones who don't fit into it. And so I put the responsibility back on drivens to, particularly young drivens, that you got to go play the game of school if you want to, you got to graduate high school. Come on. I mean, it's, yeah, but it's bullshit. It's a waste of time. Yeah, it is. But if you gamify it and you make it a little more suited towards you, it actually isn't that bad.
Yeah, it's just the ante to get in the game, right?
Yeah.
But how do you reconcile that, that wide lens and the complex multi-thinking with hyper focus? How do those two things
beautiful
happen?
That is the other thing about mastery. That'll lead us into mastery real quick. We, as driven people, there's this wonderful thing called neuropeptide Y. And it's a neuropeptide there is a lot of genetics behind it. And if you get on Stipedia, which is all the genetic research, they're now up to 143. I just looked at it, 143 different genetic combinations that lead to addiction and ADD. So it becomes so infinitely complex, it's ridiculous. And there are some genetics around this neuropeptide Y. But what neuropeptide Y does, if you think about, video games, and when a driven person can get really into something, whether it's triathlon or a video game or fishing, my current addictions, fishing, hunting, whatever, we get really into it. And it is a presenting neurochemical. And when the neuropeptide Y goes on, it allows us to actually reset the brain in an interesting way. And if you think about a hunter, And Edison, 9,999 different ways to not make a light bulb. But he never stopped. And so this neuropeptide Y allows us to, if we're chasing a rabbit, and that rabbit, we're totally on the rabbit's ass. It gets away. We get this flash of disappointment, like, oh, you see another opportunity, you see another rabbit. Ooh, another rabbit. We can immediately drop what was just going on and reset ourselves into a new focus. And so as a hunter, it's incredibly important for survival. For a cocaine addict, it almost killed me because it's like I could drop the consequence of what happened last week. Ooh, no, I got this new one. And that new focus. And it's the same thing with businesses and everything else. So hyper focus is a gift and a curse. And, as I say in my book, and mastery comes into this, because balance is bullshit. Human beings, drivens, are famous for getting out of balance. Finance, romance, and health. I'll have the best optimum body in the world. Yeah, but I can't have a relationship. And so it's like, then I'll drop my fitness, and all of a sudden I'm gonna become a relationship expert. But this tendency for drivens to overuse that hyper focus in lieu of not seeing the big picture. And so I start to incorporate these gifts to really come at, mastery, and going from George Leonard and some of the greats and standing on the shoulders, Green, of really understanding that mastery is about, and I say it 10,000 times in my book, better not ever having a finish line. Yet drivens are famous for, using our multi-thinking and our hyper focus to come up with this, oh my God, when I finally finish the Ironman, or I finally lose those 10 pounds, or I finally make 10 million bucks in the bank and I can save it, then all of my fears and worries and pain and doubt and boredom and frustration will be finished. That's not true. And I give lots of descriptions of that in my book, of just really learning to call bullshit on oneself.
Sure.
Believing that finish line is out there, and oh my God, when I finally get there, no, there is no finish line. And that is so relieving when you finally embrace it.
Absolutely. You do see it so much. I see it, I'll say, so much in what we'll call successful people a lot of times, whether it's entrepreneur, business owner, executive, thinking about the business background here, and what we might call success as a society, what might have been chased as success by that individual might have thrown everything else, or a lot of other things in life, out of balance. And a lot of guys running at high performing levels without even yet the awareness of these other things. Hey, how are you doing? I'm doing great. Well, what about all these other areas? Out of balance? But to your point about the goal mindset versus the continuum mindset, is fulfillment is never reached either, right? Because of that perspective.
And it couple simple concepts, balance is bullshit, but balancing is the point. And
maybe I'll use the word integration.
Yeah, integration. Yeah, I can go there big time with you. Integration is about wholeness. Integrity, integra means wholeness. And I, very Jungian in my understanding of how we work, but this integrating our shadow, or the parts of us that we don't like and we want to hide from others, and being driven, this feeling on the inside that there's really something missing or wrong, often gets folded into our identity, and there's something missing or wrong with me. And I call it a quarter life crisis, midlife crisis, whatever you want to do. But that's where you start to see how your outer world doesn't match the inner experience you're having. And, you look at some of our clients' lives, and, they've got tons of money. They got the wife, the kids, they've got the white picket fence. Everything is wonderful on the outer world. And that makes that inner world of really feeling like there's something missing or wrong. And that's where, drivens tend to blow up their lives. They sabotage it. They'll quit their company and go walk about. They get divorced, even worse. But it is this ability to actually reconcile those two, the inner world and the outer world. And that is that integration, combine, wholeness perspective. And, I do it in my book with friends, family, fitness, finance, fun, and faith. Very old, the 6 F's, finance, romance, and health, however you want to slice the pie. What we're doing is building an external process to reality check our emotion. And friends, how do I make it better? What is better anyway? 2.5 meetings a week and it's like, well, maybe, but fitness has to be in there too, because if I'm exercising, I'm actually a better friend. Right. And if I'm too much of a friend, I don't have enough for exercise. And finance, if you're hyper focused on money to the exclusion of friends and fitness, you'll die. And so it's like, but you hear my smile or see my laugh. It is this capacity to call bullshit on my impulsive emotional thing that I'm gifted with as a driven person. Because I will not quit. I will go headlong at something. I will, do these Ironmans. An Ironman's totally ridiculous. It's stupid. You're basically going in a big loop for 12 hours. It's like, what is the point? But the point of it is the challenge. And as I always say, be very conscious of what you're choosing to challenge yourself with. And
I find that there's I find those challenges very insightful, fulfilling. Certainly I think about them differently before and after than I do during. Often during, it's like, why did I do this again? But at the same time, and this just sprung up, so I want to ask you, is sometimes I think they have the potential to be avoidance behavior as well. So I would rather, my inclination, I would rather go do a 12, 24, 75 hour event than sit down and have a difficult emotional conversation.
That is, I say that in my book. I would rather chew on glass than sit around at a dinner table with the in-laws for 4 hours talking about nothing. I mean, it is, and that balancing point again, and choose your addictions wisely. My current addictions are fishing, bow fishing, hunting. I love to duck hunt. And as my wife can attest to, I'm a better husband if I've been fishing for a couple hours every day, because it allows me to actually reset my central nervous system and get into that hyper-focused mode. It's a meditation practice, basically.
Right.
And again, I'm a better husband if I'm exercising. But if I feel fat and lazy, I will sign up for an Ironman, not even considering my wife's. I met her during, she was training for Kona when I met her. So she gets it. But it's still, asking myself, what am I doing? And it's not what are you doing? It's really way to set up, what am I doing? And being able to set up a process, every Sunday I do it, most Sundays, of just reality checking all my F buckets and reality checking that, where do I need to, if you're standing on one leg, you're in a constant state of course correction and movement. And I think that's the mastery, kind of way of being in the world, that what would be a better way to be as fit as I can be, and as friendly, have as many friends as I can, and be a good father, and be, and looking at that whole life perspective. And I'm trying to, Tony Robbins will sue you if you call it life mastery, but really that mastery of the wholeness of your life. Right. And I think drivens, we have the opportunity, and it's true, my wife's friends who are not driven come to dinner at my house, and they, let's go fishing sometime. And it's like, dude, no, because you don't know, you're not really a fisherman. And they come down into my basement and look at my fishing tackle room, and they go like, dude, you're really into this. It's like, yeah, I know, I love it. And I'm no longer ashamed of my addictions. But if I don't reality check them, I will sign up for 2 weeks in Brazil without asking my wife. And that's not good.
Right. Yeah.
I
Let's
like,
make sure we get towards some of these things like a Sunday process to help manage like how we have conversations in our relationships, and what you found through your Zen practice and what you're doing in some of your meditation events. But I want to just ask one more question on recognition. So for somebody who, may not have the genetic testing to scientifically find 143 genetic combinations, or D2, D4, or that this is just springing to life as like, yeah, that's me, or I might need to explore this. For people who are familiar with more of a Myers-Briggs type of personality profile, is there an MBI profile that also describes this?
no. So yeah, Myers-Briggs, I'm a long time Jungian fan, and Jung came up with that. But I list 10 different traits on my website, and there is an assessment if you want to take it. And it's a real assessment. It's not just a lead gen thing. I actually created 50 questions, sent it out, and I got it nationally normed. This was after Driven came out a couple years ago. And it was so confirming that, we are different. And the 10 traits, resilience and big picture thinking, and how our identities shifty, all of those traits are captured in there. And over the last year, I'm now that I'm well over a couple thousand of these things done, there's a lot of variance in what it means to be driven. And so, is it a yes, no? Nope. It's a gray area of more and less. And in some instances, if very simply, if I'm exercising and have go get my ass handed to me for an hour, and then I meditate for 20 minutes, and then I'm fed and I've had a nap, I'm a great husband. I don't have that sense of urgency, and I don't have that, bouncing rubber ball of ADD needing me. God, I got to get out of here. But if I don't do those things, I'm nuts.
Yeah.
And so if you're driven, you'll know it just by listening to this. It's like, oh shit, maybe. Read my book, take the assessment. And again, it's not this yes or no. The point of all of this is to have insights into these different traits and how to maximize their benefit in our world and limit the harm that they can do.
Yeah, limiting the harm. So, I mean, you alluded to it, right? We may blow up relationships, we may have addictions, we may quit a career, etc. Some of these things are for you, for me, maybe they're kind of the classic midlife crisis questions. But we also talked about this thing that's going on at the quarter life, that's showing up in some really harmful ways.
Yeah, and it drivens, and I believe everybody on the planet would greatly benefit from this thing called insight into their central nervous system. And it's very simply, I'll say it again, is what's happening in my body an accurate reflection of my reality? The answer is always no. We live in a projection, we live in a biased, looped, we see what we feel and we feel what we see. And so you have to interrupt that bias, cognitive biases, at some point in your life. If you're driven, it's not a choice, because these feelings of boredom, these feelings of worthlessness, or these feelings of frustration that we live in, it's just, we're designed for a world that's much harder. And by default, most of us as drivens create worlds that are really hard to live in. And mile 2 of the run in the Ironman, there's always that, why the hell did I say yes to this shit again? Like, what? But by 26.1 of the marathon, that last 10th of a mile, and I'm thinking about my next race. And so it is that ability to call bullshit on my opinions that I'm generating in my head. Like, why am I an expert on anything? Well, I think I should feel different. And it's like, that's crazy. That's completely psychotic. And knowing that as a driven person, whether you're 22 and figuring out that, what you're doing in college is a complete waste of time. And do you have to blow it up? Should you blow it up? Because it probably is a waste of time, but so what? Do I need to do it anyway? And it's that pause moment, which is meditation, which is that capacity just to recognize what's happening in your body with curiosity, rather than the snap judgments of there's something wrong or I need to make a change. And so it is, if you're driven, you'll have to learn this, because, I've worked with, one client comes immediately to mind, 78-year-old guy. I actually interviewed him on my podcast, but a guy named Carm. He came to me at 78 trying to retire from his 5th or 6th position as a CEO. He did retire, and about a year later became almost suicidally depressed because he was loss of identity. Like, what am I then? And it wasn't that great what I did anyway. And everyone on the outside's going, dude, you're crazy. You've had this amazing life. Slow down and enjoy what you got going on now. And he couldn't. And so he eventually, you'll have to develop insight. The guy's got more money than God, and there's nothing wrong in his world, yet he still feels this sense of impending doom. And so he, glad to say now, 4 years later, he winds up developing his own mentorship program for other CEOs, and gets his own little mastermind now. He doesn't charge anything for it, but it's hand-picked guys where he found purpose and meaning in his life again.
Right.
And if you're not driven, you may have the luxury at 65 of retiring and watching things grow and being very content. Those things, but I don't have that luxury.
Yeah, you raised several reframing questions or points in the book, from this idea of identity. Who are we? Shifting to what am I doing? Or we talked about before, how can I think about better rather than maybe a binary outcome or something along those lines. So how is this? How does this insight? You mentioned the word insight several times, and your Zen practice. Just can we share a few things about how this shows up for you daily? And let's move towards how you work with others through the events you have. I mean, you mentioned like being a better person, husband, father, when you get your work done, channel your driven energy, and then you can enjoy your day. So is a morning practice in particular something you find very helpful? And you also mentioned kind of a weekly Sunday process.
Yeah. And so what's missing, and it goes back to, what's missing in our head, is this executive function. And the executive in our head is the one that decides what's the most important thing to do right now. And it's very logical and linear in its way of assessing time. Drivens are notorious at not being able to conceptualize time very well. And it is this, oh, I can do it in a day. No, you can't. Oh, it's only going to, God, it's going to take me 3 weeks to get this done. You go and sit down and do it. It's 15 minutes. And you're like, what the hell? And it's largely because we see the whole thing at the same time. And so what I do, and I guide everybody in this, is to externalize what's missing. And I get a quarterly calendar. It's what I was doing when Ironman. I periodization out. I pick my A races, B races, C races, and where do I need to be 3 weeks out, and and it allows me to actually take that big framed thinking and actually chunk it into a realistic time frame. And the brain dump exercise on Sunday is where I basically dump all of my multi-thinking out of my head onto a whiteboard. And it's incredibly important for me to get it out of my head and in reality. And then I can assess one thing at a time and see if my emotion matches that. I wake up Sunday morning and it feels like my shit's not together. Like, oh my God, I got so many things going on. Well, let me make a list. Let me dump all this out. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, I don't have that much going on, which is a dangerous place for a driven person. Because that's when we say yes to shit we shouldn't. And it's like, I can do that. So that is the moment, though, that I actually start to organize my life and really look at, well, I'm feeling fat and I haven't worked out in weeks. That's not true. I only made it to the gym once last week. So how am I going to get in my gym 3 times this week? And, I organize it, very simply in this, I have to exercise twice a week. Otherwise, I don't get suicidal, I get homicidal. I start throwing water bottles out of cars and stuff. That's what I have to do. I need to exercise probably 4 days a week to really get some benefit and really feel like I'm grounded and feel like I'm getting in better shape. I can let loose on my diet a little bit. I want to exercise 6 days a week. And that is why, because then I can eat anything I want and I feel that and I sleep better and all the other benefits. How does that impact, from have tos to want tos? What other areas of my life is that going to impact? And so I look at my networking or my friendships outside of my family and, well, I haven't talked to anybody in weeks. Well, where am I going to put that on my schedule just to make some friend time? And I can overlap. Holy crap, I can go work out with so-and-so, and that's going to knock these 2 things out. But it's a way of matching or looking at this impending doomy feeling that drivens are wired to feel. And well, I feel guilty for not working out, so I'm going to sign up for an Ironman. I mean, it's that's my nature. But I'll be divorced if I do that. So it's reality checking that and creating a system. And I encourage all of my clients, and I work with you. And I actually do have a driven journal coming out to help in this regard. But most importantly, create your own.
Yeah.
Create the one that's going to fit your life. And then seasons of your life change. I've got 2 daughters, and when they were born, I was still doing triathlon. By the time they were 2 and 4, I had to stop triathlon because it just wasn't worth it. So it's seasons of your life will change, and you're going to have to adjust this. And again, it's balancing. I might get 2 workouts in this week, and I might get 4 in next week, and I might get 1 in the week before, but I'm also making all of my daughter's volleyball games.
Right.
And moving these things around. And it's that mastery sense that how do I absolutely squeeze the most out of today, this moment, this life that I can? And it is what we are as driven people, we have to develop. Otherwise, we sign up and say yes to shit we shouldn't all day long.
Just to share a quick experience from a couple of weekends ago, I mentioned to you off air, I recently turned 50, right? And so, what's 50? For my wife, who's extremely social, that would be a huge party, right? It needs to be a very social celebration. For me, I said, you know what, I would love to go do a 50-kilometer Spartan obstacle course race on my 50th birthday. And, just have my family there. And then we're going to have like an amazing steak dinner that evening. And so great. They rallied around that. We're out there well before the sun comes up. It's freezing cold, and they see me off, and off I go. And the way they run this thing, it's 2 laps. It's a longer first lap, and then the second lap, you cut a little distance off of that. So I'm coming in very late off my first lap to the transition area, and their cutoff time's coming, right? And I'm like, I'm spent. It's 19 miles out of 31, and it's not in me that particular day. I didn't have it, right? And I was like the last guy into the transition area that they were going to consider letting back out without a just official cutoff. And part of me goes, you keep going until they pull you off the course, right? If you can't run, you're going to walk. If you can't walk, you're going to fucking crawl, right? And you're going to go until you're done. And, maybe that's going to take me 13 hours, 14 hours. And then the other part of me is going, okay, why do I need to do that? And why do I need to do that today? And the sun's gone down, and my wife and my son they're willing to stand there in the dark and in the cold and miss this dinner that would have been kind of the one official sort of true birthday celebration that we were going to have together as a family. And my son goes, come on, dad, you got to hurry up. You got to keep going. And I said, you know what? I'm going to pull myself. Call it a win, call it a failure. I don't know what it is, but there's a lot of lessons that are coming out of it. And I'm going to make a decision to call it a day and go have that dinner with my family.
Yeah. And that is the core message I'd love to give all drivens. You can have it all, but you have to keep all of it in mind. Because otherwise our FOMO, or God, I quit. No, you didn't. No, you didn't quit. You decided to actually have another win somewhere else. And it's that ability to actually not use our emotion. Not use our emotion. I say it all the time. Emotions are bullshit. They're not real. They're neuropeptide reactions you're having in your body. But they're the most important things in the world because they literally change our perception of reality. And so knowing that, and we start to anchor ourselves into reality. How should I feel about only finishing 19 miles? And you're like, I mean, it's, and so it's, you hear the laughter, you hear that lightness that comes. That is the point of all of this is, today's not preparation for some other day. This is your life. This is it. And how do I squeeze the most out of it today?
Love that.
Yeah. And it's just and as you're driven, this is not a choice, because eventually you will come up with a good idea and make your external world so good you won't be able to handle it.
How does so with your Zen practice and meditation and breath in particular, and before we run out of time, I want to talk a little bit about the specifics of breath and your event, because you've created something, and I want to go experience this with what you teach live. Is I think a lot of people are familiar with this concept of Zen applied to archery, in the historical sense.
What I was doing Bujinkan, I was mixed martial arts kind of for a minute, did a bunch of Aikido for years, but got into this. And my teacher, a guy named Randy Kelly, was a sniper in Ramadi. He's SEAL Team 3 and really became a dear, dear friend, was throwing me to the mat very hard just to make points, and taught me a lot. But then I said, hey, man, I got this idea about how I've been a long-range competitive shooter since I was in my 20s. And again, anything that we're drivens have this, anything that pulls us deeply into the present moment, whether it's, an obstacle on a freaking, course, or shooting or fishing or picking up girls, anything that actually drives that real need to be present, we can get really good at and become very addicted to. So Randy and I started talking, and we backed into this thing where I'm going to integrate, I've been a long time Zen practitioner, and that came out of a story from my dissertation chair just by chance, call it the universe delivered him. But he saved me when I was 31 years old and went through basically my quarter life crisis. So I blew up my life at 18, blew it up again at 31, and was getting divorced. Basically abandoned my wife, abandoned my first wife for my dissertation process, and she was done with it. And so I was 31 years old, teaching, completely addicted to exercise, and then broke my leg in August of that year. So April of that year, I was getting divorced. August of that year, I broke my leg, and still was ABD, was all but dissertation. And my dissertation chair looked at me and said, dude, if you don't do something, you're gonna kill yourself, or something bad's gonna happen. I was doing bar dips on my walker because of my broken leg. I seriously was losing my mind. And as a good driven person that I am, I signed up for a 10-day meditation retreat for the first, never meditated before, really. And let's dive deep. And I immediately went there. That was like 2001, 2000. And I went there, and as a driven person, immediately saw the potential of what they were teaching and how I could do it better. And so it was, I can really take, how this would apply to driven and my entrepreneurs I'm working with. And I just ran with it. And again, it was at the perfect timing for the world to see, the functional MRI and what the hell's really going on in meditation. And the two operating systems that we live in, we have one below our nose that is impulsive and the Kahneman stuff, very reactive, very fast, very, and then we have this neurochemical or neuro neocortex that is reasoning and logical and wants to be in charge. And meditation was a way to biologically and neurologically connect these two in a way that allowed for insight. And so very simply, what I've discovered is there is no recoil in the present moment. And, you know, that gun is one of the best teaching tools, particularly than any shooters out there. I shoot 300 Norma mags and I shoot 375 Chitex. I shoot crazy big guns. And I mean, they are, some of them 7, 8, 9,000 foot-pounds of energy coming out of the end. Your body, this very fast system that's going on below your nose, will reflexively brace against the recoil, even though it's not present. So you can have insight how your body is actually bracing against something that isn't happening right now. And then you can hack that neurochemical, neuropeptide Y, and really hyper focus on your breath, really hyper focus on the temperature of the trigger. And, you know, it's a little cooler because it's metal, and what you're seeing through the scope. And literally it connects very interesting parts of the brain that allow us to feel this sense of presence, capital P presence, and, you know, divine presence or presence. God is presence. And it's not, you know, divine presence. It's not something new happening to the present. It's all present is divine. And it is a trippy experience to be able to feel the bullet go down the barrel. Feel your intuitive sense of where that bullet is going to blow in the wind. Feel in your body that you know you're going to hit the target before you hit the target. Yeah. And it hacks that very curious thing called intuition. And, you know, Zen is all about subject and object. Am I the gun, the bullet, and the target one thing or two? The answer is yes. And so that ability to feel them blending together, feel your body say, oh no, the gun's dangerous, and brace against it, and then use your focus to actually drop in deeper into the present. And so it's an extraordinary experience of really demonstrating that anything is possible if you know how to harness the present. And that resistance, we have physical resistance, and this is, you know, the art of war, or the war of art, but it is this ability for my human body to reality check that resistance. And so January in the gym, everybody seems to be very motivated to go to the gym. But what happens 3 weeks in is your body will start to resist the changes you're making. And you feel that resistance, it'll hit the neocortex or the monkey mind, and you'll come up with great reasons to not go to the gym, and also a big asshole gorilla that wants to beat you up to go to the gym. And the process is there, right there in that moment. You can see and experience that there is no resistance in the present. You're not being present. And so that's good news that you can do anything. The bad news is you have no excuse to not do anything.
I like that. Yeah, and it very much is the old Zen archery, you know, the arrows hit the target before you released it.
Yeah. And it is, but it's a physical experience. And I, you know, you come to one of my retreats and I get you into the neurobiology of it, and, you know, the vagal nerve, and really, you know, how we can use this extrasensory perception to really feel the potential of what you're doing. And, you know, any real big business guys out there, when you're walking into a sales room and you already feel that you've got the sale, all you have to do is not fuck it up, and just that dropping in to that intuitive intuition. And it's like, I'm not quite sure why I said what I said, but it worked. That is the gift of driven. And I teach how to harness that gift. And it's almost an unfair advantage to people who don't have it. It really is.
I think that same vagal nerve, the central nervous system triggering that experience, that the mind body exercise is why I enjoy or hate to enjoy ice baths. That
Yeah.
shock to the system.
And I have a guy come, we do heat to cold during the break in between the shooting. And it is that the body's going to resist the cold, but it's not cold right now. It's actually warm. And as you dip your toe into that 40 degree or 37 degree freaking water, you can meet it with curiosity, and it's more tingly than actually cold. And it actually hurts, and it's not cold. And so you can actually learn to tolerate anything if you're present to it. And I worked with so many Navy SEALs back in the day, now that, you know, I got into that world, and it's just doing a lot of shit that you don't want to do. And that's what leads to a really good life. And it's, you know, I don't want to go to the gym, but I know I need to.
And it becomes that interesting exercise of controlling physiology to affect psychology. Right.
You know, it's the brain is between the ears. The mind is the whole body.
Absolutely.
Including the brain, including all of this. And, you know, one of the reasons mindfulness comes and goes from the world so often is that they think it's a brain activity of actually doing something in your head to match something in your body. No, it's about embodiment. And then you very quickly, 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks into a meditation practice, realize, holy, that's hard. Like, my body's resisting it. And learning how to be in that resistance is where you'll start to really apply what you're learning on the meditation cushion to the rest of your life. You know, I can go in and talk to my daughters about why they lost their cell phone again. And it is that, I don't want to do this, but I can feel my feet on the floor walking in. I can feel the cold doorknob opening their door. I can feel all of those things and do it anyway.
Right. That's the magic of it, right? How do we bring it back to a better quality life and relationship and parenthood? I got one more down in the weeds question I want to make sure I ask you before I run out of your time, which is, you describe in the book, I mean, there's so much more in there, right? People need to get this. By the way, I got Amazon showing up today with 5 more copies. I'm going to give some friends that need it and want it. You do talk about the breath exercise that you use and recommend and put to work in your events. And I want to ask, as someone who's done box breathing in particular for quite a while and tend to do it with my eyes closed, you've got what I would describe as a little bit more of a triangle pattern, and there's something particular about eyes open in your practice.
Yeah, it's, if you're really driven, and oftentimes when drivens close their eyes, it makes the multi-thinking go crazy. Mm. And so the point of meditation is to have no point. And so it's a very zen-y thing, but it's is what's happening in my body an accurate reflection of my immediate reality? And if you're driven and you use your eyeballs to orient to what's going on in the real world, it's a distraction, because most people's central nervous systems are attached to what's going on in their head. Why are you so stressed out? Because of 9, 10, 12 things going on in my head. Where meditation, particularly for drivens and ADD people, it's learning to harness what I'm paying attention to. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the metaphor I always use is, you know, training a Labrador puppy. And the hardest thing I've ever learned is gentleness with myself. The biggest asshole in the room is always me to me. I've got the gorilla in here and you're a piece of shit, don't quit. But that ability to actually understand that meditation is not learning to stay focused on one thing. Meditation is coming back into focus on that one thing. Mm-hmm. And a good meditation is 10,000 returns to the candle, not 5. And so when I'm really distracted, yes, good practice. That is where you're making the most bang for the buck. The breathing. And breathing
So sorry, just to ask then so the eyes open is just another way of bringing the concentration, the attention back to a focal point.
right.
Okay.
And it is, we use our eyeballs for safety detection. And it's our reflex, bang goes off in the room, you're going to orient your eyes to the threat. Closing your eyes, and the practice I come from is always eyes open, is a way of actually being in reality and using all of your senses to be in the present. Closing your eyes always felt like I'm submitting and giving in. Like the guy with the hammer can come hit me in the back of the head now. And it is, I talk with my Navy SEALs, they're like, oh no, I ain't closing my eyes. I don't trust you. And I grew up with brothers. I don't trust you. Close your eyes, man. Somebody can put something in your nose. So it allowed me to actually really, and I position and really keeping your posture right and lowering your eyes to a 45-degree angle is very neurobiological, in that you're triggering the part of your brain to take in new information. If someone's looking up when they're talking to you, they're using a part of the brain to come up with a good story or narrative. They're bullshitting. If you're looking straight ahead, you're in threat detection. If you're looking at a menu or reading a book, you're often drifting the eyes downward. Mm-hmm. So the Japanese 800 years ago figured out, whoa, that makes it a little bit more interesting or more new. The breathing is, I keep it really simple. And, one of the key awarenesses in meditation, if it feels like you're breathing wrong, that means you're doing it right. Yeah, but that last breath was better than this breath. And this breath is a little more shallow. And that breath, it's all judgment. It's all bullshit. No two breaths are exactly the same. You're not going to count the same, even if you're box breathing and if you're doing these things. So again, it's that lighter attitude of training this Labrador puppy. You're not going to smack it and yell bad dog. You're going to gently reach out, gently bring it back just to the point of focus. And it's going to sit there for half a second, then wander off. And you're going to gently pick it up and come back. And it is breathing. The only real thing I'm a stickler for is about 1/3 to 2/3. So it's 1/3 of the breath in, 2/3 out. It can be 1 second to 2 seconds or 3 seconds. It can be 3 seconds to 9 seconds, but it's that general. And if you start catching yourself, well, that was too long, too short, that's just judgment. Come back to the breath. No two breaths are the same. And it's that lighter attitude that is the real takeaway. That's the real work. Yeah. And, enlightenment means to lighten the fuck up. And so it is, in how am I lightening up is I'm not taking this shit so serious. And like then when serious things do happen, I can take that serious. And it's just reality checking that emotion.
I can relate to that. Yeah, I like that. Well, fantastic. Doug, I don't want to take more of your time today. I've run over what I scheduled with you. So thank you for that patience. Again, the book Driven, obviously available everywhere books are sold. I know I ordered mine off Amazon, like I said. Where else do we find you as far as the assessment and then your events?
Yeah, so all things Dr. Doug is imdriven.com. So very simple. Lands all in one place. You can find about shooting retreats, and yeah, with COVID, they are happening again.
They are. Okay, great.
And I'm in Nashville, I'm Tennessee. So I moved from San Diego a couple of years ago, and this is thank God I'm here. I love it here.
I may be right behind you. I'm still in San Diego today, and we're looking at high schools for my son. Nashville is one of the places we were looking at.
Yeah.
So
it's better than you could ever dream. I had no idea how good it was.
Oh, Nashville's a great town.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
So are your live events all there in Tennessee as well, or you move around the country?
Hey, I have a place in Ohio I go to because we can shoot out to 2,500 yards. Nice. But the place in Tennessee is only 1,500 only. It's only 1 mile. So we shoot ridiculously long ranges. Your brain will tell you very quickly that can't be done, but you'll feel in your body you can do this. And then you do it, and it makes your head explode in a good way. It's really cool.
When's your next one? How often are you running them?
I'm actually going on Monday, Tuesday. We're running them. Holidays are going to screw it up, but we'll start them again February, March. We'll run them every month.
Every month. Fantastic. All right. I love it. Well, I got to check that out, and we'll get all the links and stuff up to the tribe. I super appreciate your time, Doug. I was really looking forward to this, and man, wealth of stuff in here, insight and awareness. And I hope it really speaks to the community.
I appreciate your time, Michael.
Thank you.
Have a great day.